You're listening to 4CRB's interviews and talkback series.
Yep.
Well, welcome. No, I'm not even going to stay with well. Let's keep going again. Welcome to the microphone. Welcome to the studio, Supreme Court Judge David Ashton Lewis.
As always, thank you for having me, and I say thank you for those listening out there to both Colin and I, and we will do our best to entertain you with a good
Well, we've been talking off air about how exacerbated we are with the state of the world, the state of the media, the state of a great many things. So we thought we'd dive into history for something different.
Oh, good. Now, I think our listeners like our historical ambling, don't they?
They do.
Good.
We had, in fact, I've had two requests for this topic in the last year, and it was the Persian Empire.
Oh, good. Very interesting.
And I know that you're a bit of a buff, so buff away.
Well, you're a bit of a buff, so we'll buff together. Yep, Persian Empire. Cyrus the Great, 580 BC. Cyrus is like a tribal chieftain, but that's really not right. But he decides, and he brings the different Persian, because it was known as Persia then, and Persians, today Iranians, while they're Muslim, they are not Arabs. Now, in 580 BC, there was no Islam. And so he brought all these disparate groups together and created the state or the area known as Persia. And then he went on, again, not so much conquests, but to expand that empire, or expand and make an empire, and he did. He was quite an interesting man because he was a warlord, but he was also humane. Because if we move up to, now there were, at his time, there were tribes of Israel in Persia that had been brought there after the diaspora, the spreading by the Egyptians, and the Jews were bought as slave labor into what is today Persia or Iran. Anyway, he was known for being a person who had a concept of humanity and of being aware of other people. Like, if you don't want to be hurt yourself, then don't hurt others. Now, he fought on the battlefield, but he was not known for being a vicious conqueror and respecting the right to life, etc. I'm really simplifying it down because we only have, a short time. So anyway, he was the Persian who freed the Jews and said, you can go back to Israel. There was no Palestine then. There never has been Palestine. And they didn't see it in that differential way because the Israelis, or people we now know as Jews, they are Semitic people. And the other non-Jews in the Middle East...
Define Semitic.
Well, no, it's just all right. You're Germanic. I'm Anglo-Saxon Celtic.
Sure.
So the Semites was the ethnic racial group of the Jews. It was also the ethnic racial group.
Because I love that we hear that term anti-Semitic, and it is anti-group of people, for want of a better term.
Well, I've said at times in my life, so you're anti-Arab and you're anti-Palestinian. No, I'm not. I have no great respect or courage for the Jews, and I've said, but they're all the same. They are Semitic people. Oh, right. But again, we have so much go on around us without people doing homework or knowing. But anyway, we go back to Cyrus. Cyrus said, you may go, because he was aware that they were treated harshly. And so this is 580 BC. They were treated harshly. Why? Because they were basically slaves, but they did well. They did banking. They did, and their masters respected and said, gee, you've got more money. Will you give it to us? Because they didn't ask to be lent, and the Jewish people in Persia gave it because they really had no choice. But Cyrus recognized, and not just him, these people are different. And so he said, go. And they went back to what we now know today, Israel, Jerusalem, that area. And he gave them safe passage. Because if you think of where Iran is, you think of where Tehran is, and then you think where Jerusalem is, it's a bit of a long haul. So he gave them protection so they wouldn't be molested or hurt.
Nice.
Now, that has always led people really hard to understand. But basically, again, because we haven't got time to go into greater depth, he was basically a kind but hard humanitarian man. And he was particularly concerned with human suffering. And he balanced it against, if I can make it simple, if I wouldn't like to be treated like that, other men wouldn't.
Sure.
So he was a different fellow in that. Now, he established the empire of what we saw, not what we saw Iran fall to in 1979. It was noble. And this is over, really, 2,500 years. It was known for opulence in building, in architecture. Of course, around 640, Iranians or Persians became Muslims. Now, their brand of Islam is different to other Middle Eastern Arabic countries. They are Shiite Muslims, not Sunni Muslims. Now, 90% of Muslims today are Sunni. Indonesia, 120 million, largest Muslim country in the world.
Russia has.
Yeah, it did.
There's a number
near where the Cossacks were, but
there's a number of stands that are very Asian orientated, and there's.
Tell me, can you name them?
Kazakhstan, no.
Yeah. Uzbekistan,
Uzbekistan,
Kyrgyzstan.
There you go.
Yeah, no, you've got it. And so Islam spread, and not always violently. And remember, we've talked about two periods in Islam. The Meccan period, and the Medina period. And it's the Meccan period that is like Christianity. You know, give alms, be gentle, do good works. Don't persecute people because they don't follow your belief. Now, Christianity has a difficult history in that. The Inquisition, that was dreadful.
Very much so.
But,
and in more recent times, you've got the Ku Klux Klan.
Yes, and how dreadful were they? But we go back. So Cyrus was really, in many ways, a model emperor. And he built Persia into what it was and what it became. And he had, I think, a grandson called Darius. And he was a bit rougher, but he followed Cyrus's way. So Iran or Persia was known as being enlightened, was known as valuing education. Women were treated
great libraries.
Yes. Well, yes, they did, but not as good as the library at Alexandria.
Sure.
But, yes, you're right, because learning was important, and that stayed in Islam right up to the 1300s in terms of science, astronomy, not astrology, astronomy, mathematics, and our number systems are Arabic.
Look, I'm a big fan of when we get to libraries and printing presses because I see it as a forebear to what we have today. At the end of the day, you can now print things and ideas and thoughts and entire journals and en masse and distribute it. Where once upon a time, or prior to doing that, we'd have conversations and then we'd go and have another conversation and another conversation. We could now have that one conversation or that one idea, print 1,000 of them and distribute it.
Well, the continuous conversations, though, is the beginning of the scholastic method.
Sure.
Now, who introduced that into the West? Muslims. And under the Caliphate, which was around in the 1400s, on the whole, not everywhere, but on the whole, There was tolerance of Christianity, of Judaism, and there was a sense that we can learn from them. But you see, in Islam, that seemed to change round about after what is today Istanbul fell. So let's go back to Cyrus. So he inculcated a scholastic method: think, speak, investigate. And the Muslims were the leaders of this, way in front of the West, as late as the 1400s. It was really the sadness of 1452 when the Byzantine kingdom, and I've forgotten the name of the last Byzantine king, the Muslim forces, the Seljuk Turks and others, sieged Istanbul, Constantinople,
Sure.
and it fell after 1,000 years. And that's where, as far as Western and Islamic relations, changed. But go back again to Cyrus. He was the founder of things like, inquiring mind and understand. And there was no, don't persecute different religions. We all live together. And so he was very good like that. And anyone who's followed, before the Iranian Revolution in 1979, if you followed it, you could see the beauty of the court in Tehran.
Nice.
Now, older Australians our age, you weren't born this, but in 1962, from memory, the Empress Faradiba, Iranian Empress, came to Australia. And I can remember my mother looking at Woman's Weekly, and it showed all where she was taken around by the federal government and state governments. And she was a picture of elegance, grace, and serenity. But because of certain aspects of people who are empowered under the Shah, he was known as the Shah of Iran, and he was known as the Shahanshah, the King of Kings. And it is his son, who's now probably late 60s or late 50s, the Crown Prince, who appears to be getting, because he's speaking out of the country about Persian values, Persian humanity, Persian learning, and he's getting traction.
The thing that I enjoy as I study history, and especially at the moment, we see civilizations, we see components of the world rise and fall. And I'll give an example: the Egyptian Empire, the Persian Empire, the Incan Empire, the Roman Empire. It goes into rapid expansion,
Yes.
and then it eventually declines,
Shrinks.
and as someone aptly described in a book that I was reading, the rot begins, and it
does.
usually starts at the political level.
Oh, look, I think that's right. And I think we are facing serious questions about that today in our politics, US politics, British politics. And you only hope that our current batch of politicians... Look, I can tell you now, I have not heard anyone say, gee, aren't we lucky? Anthony Albanese and his strident wisdom,
Look, I
or
think
Keir Starmer and his strident wisdom.
Look, we grew
Donald
up,
Trump.
We grew up in the lucky country, and I'm hearing, and a lot of people are commenting on the side and around about that we're definitely not as lucky as we once were.
And why is that?
Because in essence, I think the entire world is in decline, and that could be due to a number of factors.
Such as?
Well, the COVID component was a triggering point. Yes. Then we had the GFC prior to that. There are a number of issues, but we're now starting to see that the larger powers who were globally focused are now focusing inwards because we're not as well-to-do as we once were.
No, you're right there. And it's important then, though, that people look at what we were, what we've become, and it's not as bad as everyone says, but what we must not let be threatened.
I just remember reading a wonderful biography of a lady who was a Jew in World War II.
Yes.
And obviously still was a Jew after World War II. Went through concentration camps and survived the Holocaust. And she said that it was interesting because it just started small. And we go, that's not so bad. Then there'll be another creep. That's not so bad. That's not so bad. We'll endure. It'll be fine. It'll be okay. Well, it was absolutely horrendous.
Yes,
now, I often sit there and draw those parallels with
putting a lobster in a big pot of water and slowly turning up.
And you look at what's going on today and you go, yeah, it's not too bad. It's okay. It'll be all right.
Yes.
No, we do need to stand up and do something.
Well, we do need to reflect. One of the sadnesses, because you like history and I like history, and one of the sadnesses, we have a lot of very strident mouths who simply don't know much about how Australia came into being, what we built this nation. They'll make platitudes, the lucky country. Well, still today it is. But we must be prepared to learn about it and to protect it.
And it's funny, isn't it? The cynical person will say that those things were taken out of our education system on purpose. And then the realist to a point will say they were taken out of our education system because, you know what, we really don't need that in our everyday lives or that understanding to get through our day-to-day lives.
Yes.
Look, I think there's a little bit of both in that. To a point, we do need to understand the society we live in. We do need to understand the rules or the guardrails of how we operate, and whether that's the rule of law, the rule of Parliament, or how Parliament functions.
I couldn't agree with you more.
And not only that, know what is right and what is wrong. And that does need to be at the forefront.
But we need to be careful with that because, when you have a multi-ethnic, multicultural society, what is right to one is abhorrent to another. And I think if most...
Give me an example.
Yeah, the treatment of the standing of women in Islam. Their standing in law, 2 women up against 1 man. Under that Sharia, it's the evidence, if it's a woman against a man, her evidence, it caters for half. So she's got to produce another woman to match the 1 man's thing. Now, I don't mean to be offensive, but I think truth needs to be told. You've got people who take a view that women have a different standing in our culture. Now, it's us to be respectful to say yes, but women also have a standing in our culture, and it's taken hundreds of years for them to be treated equally.
Look, I think that when you do come to this country, and we're digressing from the Persian
let's go back to Persia.
The rules and regulations of who and what we are is what you choose to adopt when you come here for the fact that you wanted a better life for you and your family. We're not asking you to change the way you function within your own household, but we are asking you to change the way you function in our society.
Well, even in your household, a woman can't be a slave in a household and then be, no, but you're equal. So it really is what you're driving at. We, as a decent, kind and democratic people, should accept people from all over the world. But where we have fallen over the last 30 years is being hesitant to say, but the dominant culture here is based on Judeo-Christian principles, and we welcome you. You don't have to give up Buddhism or Shintoism or Islam, but you do have to look where what's important to you in those religions is in conflict with the country that has accepted you.
So we're going back to the Persians, and as you were saying, the original person who, and I've forgotten his name.
Cyrus,
who brought all of those communities together, all those cultures together, all those tribes together. And
he protected women.
And was tolerant and understanding.
Yeah.
And was able to form a bond.
Yeah, look, that's a good way to put it. He was tolerant and he developed understanding because on my reading about the Persian Empire, Cyrus's idea, if we are to last, if we are to be looked up to by the world, then we must behave with charity, with fairness, respecting all. Now, I understand he did hold very strong views of the equality of women.
Sure. And this is the point I think that we were going to round off on,
Yes.
that we can look back in the past and we can see what worked and we'll see what brought people together.
Yes.
And we can see also what pushed people apart
Yes.
and made them violent enemies.
Yep, we can.
Great examples all through history of these components. And I think that, not saying that we have to be a student of history and
No, we
reinvent.
don't.
We just need to say that worked there. Can it work here?
Yep.
And draw some parallels. David, I'm going to leave you to sum up now.
All right, so what has to happen really is that we can accept that religion divides people. And when you've got a community with different religions, there's got to be some mechanism to say you can all have your own religions, but it must never divide us.
Absolutely.
You need to be tolerant of each other. You need to be not even understanding. How many average Australians understand Islam? How many average Australians really understand the Gospels? And so you've got
Again, David, we understand that there is Shintoism. We understand
Yes.
Buddhism. We understand that there are a number of dominant religions, and we wouldn't even call Buddhism a religion. It is a
No,
way
it's a
of life.
philosophy.
Yeah, it's a
It's
way.
not a religion.
But on the flip side of the coin, maybe from their point of view, that they would see it very differently to us. We just need to be understanding that that's their belief.
Well, that's where the concept of being Australian comes in. It's not a religion, it's not a race, it's not an ethnicity. It is a beast that was developed called Australia. And that beast, welcome. I always love the words of the Seekers in that song. We are one, but we are many, and from all the lands on earth we come. We share a dream, we sing with one voice. I am, you are, we are Australian. That really needs to be educated. I hope it is, because to sum up what we've been talking about, my understanding of Cyrus the Great was a great part of that. And that's 2,500 years ago.
Well, I hope we've stimulated some thinking for you
Yes.
this morning. And we thank you very much for your company. And thank you, David, very much for your time.
Oh, thank you for having me, as always.
You've been listening to 4CRB's interviews and talkback series. Support local online content and become a financial supporter today at 4CRB.com.